Hello, welcome to yet another one-on-one Crave the Podcast style episode. This week we're kind of diving into a genre that you may have heard us talk about and dispute and go back and forth on a little bit in some of our previous episodes, which is disco. And besides it being, I guess, somewhat of a hot topic in our little circle, it's generally one of the more, I think, strangely controversial genres of music, because to me it's like a no-brainer. It's like dance music. It's super catchy, super fun, but to a lot of people it has a lot of negative connotations, and we'll probably dive into those a little bit, but we'll also be talking about why we love it, the history of it, and how it sort of survives today and has permeated throughout dance music and just music in general. So yeah, I'm Jake. I am a podcaster here, and I'm joined by
I'm Kiara Demare. I'm a podcast host as well and a disco fanatic. So I'm very excited to be here and to be having this conversation.
Yes. I'd say as of recent, I'm somewhat of a disco fanatic or fan or whatever. My background with it is more through house music, I would say, which is something that I'll be getting into a little bit in like the post history of disco section of this. But through that, I've come to appreciate disco a lot more as well.
Yeah, for sure. I've always because growing up, my parents would always play like Michael Jackson, obviously, and like Shaka Khan. Like I didn't know who she was growing up, but I remember it was kind of towards the beginning of my freshman year here at Boulder, which is this year, I guess. And a Shaka Khan like interview came up on my YouTube like for you page or whatever, and I was like, oh my god, I totally forgot about her. And then I just kind of fell down the disco rabbit hole, and I have not gone out of it since, and I don't plan to. It's so great. Like I don't, it's such an not like underrated, but kind of a forgotten kind of a thing, I'd say, like a forgotten genre almost.
Yeah, if not underrated, overhated, I
Yeah,
think
there
is
you go.
is a good way to say it. But
Good.
I was gonna ask sort of about how you got into it, because it is something that I feel like not a lot of people necessarily are getting into, at least classic 70s disco nowadays. So yeah, you grew up on it a little bit. You kind of rediscovered it through the internet, which makes sense. You said Michael Jackson, Shaka Khan. Were there any other like disco artists you grew up on?
There was
And
like a little bit of Earth, Wind, and Fire, like the basic like September, but really that was kind of it. My mom was a huge Shaka Khan fan, so she was kind of my main girl. Is still my main girl, but
okay. were they like alive, like, and at the like proper age to be like in discos in the clubs in the 70s, or was it more of a retrospective thing for them too?
it was definitely a retrospective thing. Like I know because my mom was born in the 70s, so she was too young to really
Yeah, she was
experience that.
not
But
doing
I
poppers and cocaine in the clubs as a 10-year-old, probably.
hope not. Yeah. um, so definitely my grandparents put that on her, and then she brought it on to me. So
Nice. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the history of disco. I don't know, what can you tell me? What do you know? And then I'll see where that leads us.
yeah, so I have a few notes here actually. But so
Awesome.
um I know disco is kind of like a cultural reset for sure. I know there's like a kind of a popular saying that like disco saved dancing, like around that era, not a lot of dance music. Like it was kind of more the rock era, I guess, was kind of beginning. Um and so like a lot of the dance music was dying out. And I know disco was like a huge like safe haven for like LGBTQ people and like black people. It was like the club was kind of their like safe haven where they could really be themselves and just kind of go do whatever they wanted without being judged. And disco had like a huge part in that for sure. Um, and yeah, and disco also kind of introduced technology in music, I guess. Like
Mm-hmm.
it really started the whole like DJ fanatic kind of a thing, and then like the remix too. Like remixes weren't really a thing until disco came about. Um, yeah, that's kind of like it was just pretty a big cultural reset for a while is kind of what I'd say.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what was like dance music before disco. Would that have been like funk, and then before that like kind of jazz and big band stuff in the 30s and 40s, and then obviously funk's a little bit later, but I'm just
Yeah,
trying
I
to think.
yeah. Hmm.
And those were also sort of predominantly like black genres that had a lot of controversy around them, similar to disco, um, for how they kind of like played with traditional, I guess, Western musical standard norms and that kind of thing. And even rock and roll obviously was originally coming from more of those places and was then
Right.
kind of co-opted. And then it sort of became the big rival to disco and the thing that ultimately kind of led to its downfall. Do you know about like the disco demolition derby night or whatever?
I know. I don't know if this is the same thing, but it's like it was like a baseball game or something, right? They're
Yes,
like
yes.
disco's dead or some like they charged the field or something happened and they were like disco's dead.
Yeah, it's
Something.
really actually even more like insidious and messed up than that. It was this like officially sanctioned by like the team and everything, and it was in Detroit, which ironically is where like house and techno music, which are kind of offshoots of disco, would eventually kind of spring up in Detroit. But it was 1979, and it was a baseball game where this local rock fanatic radio DJ, who hated disco for whatever reason, probably because it was like a liberating black LGBTQ genre, and this dude just wasn't having it. And he, yeah, like it was an event. It was like if you bring a disco record to like burn and destroy in this like pre-game show, you'll get your like a discount on your baseball ticket. And then it ended up turning into like a riot where people stormed the field and the game got canceled. And I mean that was kind of like the last straw for disco, because it already had controversy surrounding it and people saying that it was kind of vapid and didn't really, it wasn't like I don't know, this argument gets used a lot throughout history and even today with like newer genres like hip hop and different kinds of electronic music, like not real music, which is one of the craziest things that I feel like I can't believe it whenever I hear it still to this day.
Mhm.
Um, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, but yeah, that disco demolition derby night, that was kind of the nail on the coffin for the classical, I guess, uh, meaning of disco, even though it still survives very much today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I remember reading about that and just like cannot believing that that was like actually happened, you know? Like
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's
That's all.
insane.
Like that's insane to me.
It's very
But
insane. It's like one thing to not like a kind of music, but to like make it this cute kind of performative thing to be like, oh my god, it's so bad, we're gonna just destroy it like in this, I don't know, cheeky way, but it there's a
yeah.
lot more like hate and like true like I feel like, I don't know, evil behind it too, just coming
Mhm.
from where disco was coming from and the kind of people that made it and found a home within that sort of music, to just be like, it's so bad that we need to literally destroy it. It's very messed up.
Well, I feel like different genres of music definitely like compete, I guess you could say, against each other, but nothing ever like that. I don't think that's ever really like happened before, you know?
Yeah,
Like, and I feel like now like each genre has kind of found their own place, you know? So nothing like that needs to happen, but I just can't picture that really ever happening now, you know? Like,
yeah, I would hope not, honestly, too. I would hope something like that never happens again because it's stupid.
yeah, for real.
And it's also interesting. I mean, this is something I've been like thinking about a lot. This, I mean, really, this whole year, just like I don't know. I've been thinking about it for whatever reason. How like reactive music is to like the culture that surrounds it, basically, and the times and the politics and everything. It's like people this is whenever people like are critical of new music and new styles of music and whatever. I just always think it's funny because it's like, do you want music to just stay the same? Would it be good if people were just making the same rock music that they were making in the 70s? Or like, I mean, this literally happens with every new kind of music. Would it be better if we were still just making classical compositions exclusively? I don't really think so. I think it is like music is so reflective of the people who make it and the culture that they exist within. And like one kind of small example of that is to go back to Michael Jackson, Off the Wall, 1979. That is his first like, so not his first solo record, but his first post Jackson 5 record, his first record produced by Quincy Jones. And it's very much like a straight up disco record. It has live drums, it has the strings and the horn sections, everything you would expect from like a disco record. And it's great. I love Off the Wall. It's probably my favorite Michael Jackson album. And then obviously the next album, Thriller, is huge, and I love that album a lot too. But and that came out in 1982, so that is 3 years after Disco Demolition Derby, which is just like, it's a pretty good, I feel like, marker in time for kind of when disco stopped being as popular as it was. Yeah, so it's like 3 years after, and it has a lot more elements of. I didn't even know this was a thing until I was like doing some research on like Thriller, but there's like post disco is like its own genre, which I didn't even realize, and that kind of um, it doesn't really exist. It didn't last as long as some of the subgenres that kind of split off from it, or like at least took inspiration from it, which would be things like new wave in the 80s took a lot of post disco inspiration, and then also house, which I keep mentioning, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, post disco, and that's kind of in a lot of ways what Thriller was. It has electronic drum machines in addition to live drums, which is kind of a change there. I mean, obviously it's a technological change because like I don't know when drum machines first started to really get popular. I think the 808 and like the 909, I think they came out in the 80s. So I know that's when they were
Yes.
popularized, if nothing else, in genres like hip hop and house. But yeah, that is in Thriller. And then also the song Beat It, uh, with like the Eddie Van Halen solo. And it's like very reactive. It's like a rock dance song. It's like he was making straight up disco before, and then once it was just like culturally seen as this like really shallow, or like widely seen as like this really shallow, just like trashy genre, he kind of stepped away from it and took up rock. And then after that he like goes way off the wall with, not that was terrible because that's his album, he goes off the rails with like the new Jack Swing revival, but we're not talking about that
Yeah.
because I don't know how I feel about new Jack Swing. But anyway, yeah, I just think that's interesting how reactive music is. And yeah, disco died, and it birthed a lot of cool things.
Yeah.
It didn't
Disco
die.
still lives on in my heart. It lives on in my heart.
It lives on in my
Yeah.
heart, it lives on in your heart, and it also lives on in all of these modern music genres, or even not even just modern music genres. A lot of pop music still today takes like huge influence from disco. I mean, like Dua Lipa, Nostalgia. Wait, what is her album called? Future Nostalgia? Is that what it's called? Do you know?
I don't know, but I think so.
Yeah.
That's what I was. Yeah. The music sounds very like disco inspired, and I think that is why it's so popular, because of the nostalgic value that it has to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that album brings back a lot of things that you don't necessarily hear every day, with like some of the live bass, the syncopated kind of bass rhythms that you hear so much on disco, and then also the fact that it's live, which is a huge staple of disco. Although, as you mentioned, there is also kind of the birth of electronic dance music in a lot of ways is ode to disco, with stuff like Giorgio Morter. Do you know him?
Can't say I do.
I think you might not know his name, but you probably like Donna Summer. I think it's Feel the Love. Is that what it's called? Hold on.
I think so.
Where is my disco? Here it is. Oh, I Feel Love.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that is a Giorgio Morter produced track, and it's got all the synths, all the drum machines, all that stuff. Yeah, good stuff. And disco is one of the first genres that kind of brought that into the popular, the mainstream, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of later on disco. Like in the beginning, It definitely took a lot of like, it was all just live instruments, and then as disco evolved, it like so did the technology behind it, I think. So it's really interesting to listen to like the 10-year gap that disco was really popular, because it like the amount that it like evolved even in that little bit of time is crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but back on with like Dua Lipa, I like think, especially with like, so you know how Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak are like working together again, or not again, but they're working together. That brings up so much. Like I love the one song they've already come out with is
It's
so
amazing.
great. Like Leave the Door Open.
Oh my god.
I think they both really play into that kind of like that style of music, and I think that's why it's so successful for them as well.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, I feel like disco is just like one of the purest forms of dance music, which has never really gone away, even though different styles of it that gain popularity have faded. It's just great dance music. It's like one of the easiest things to like get people moving, I feel like, because it has the live instrumentation. A lot of people, especially older people, are instantly just like turned away from music that has electronic elements. So, to have that, I feel like it really kind of bridges a lot of gaps. And same thing with like the Dua Lipa album, and
yeah, sure.
I mean, there's a bunch of modern music that takes influence from it. One thing I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of the most, I guess, I would say immediate and like important successor to disco, and I've like already talked about it, like mentioned it a few times, but I'll go in a little more depth here, is house music. And I want to talk about some of the like just structural things, the kind of defining traits of disco, and then we can like talk about how they pop up in house, but then also some of the more modern stuff we're talking about. So when I think of like the defining traits of disco, I think of, first of all, the 4 on the floor kick pattern. So that's with like the kick drum, just the boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, iconic. And it's just
Easy
like
to dance to.
it's the easiest thing to like, yeah, get people moving for sure. The drums always sound like very shimmery and airy to me. That gives me like, that just like sounds very disco. A lot of like maybe rock drums are a little heavier and drier. And I think of disco drums as having this like really shimmery, yeah, like just like you're floating on a cloud kind of sound to them. There's lots of auxiliary percussion and drum fills. There's almost always, in addition to the 4 on the floor, there's 2 and 4 on the second and fourth beat. There's like either a clap or a snap or a snare. The disco clap is just, it's huge sometimes. I'm thinking of, what song is it? It's Michael Jackson, but it has like one of just like literally I could listen to this song just for the clap. Oh my god, Rock With You, the clap that comes in on the chorus, it just sounds like it like knocks the wind out of you. It's so like whooshy and oh, it's great. And then another huge thing is chicken scratching. That's like the, I guess, somewhat technical term for that like really fretty, strutty guitar sound that you always hear in disco. Chicken scratching. I already mentioned like the horn lines, the string sections, lots of horn stabs as well. That's like the more percussive horn sounds, where it's just like a little staccato, short, stabby note, as the name implies. And then groovy moving bass lines and generally lots of syncopation. That's kind of like what makes up a lot of disco tracks. And pretty much all of that is found within house music. I guess the main differences are you're going to hear a lot more electronic drums using typically either the 808 or the 909 drum machines by Roland, which came out from Japan. I don't know when. I think they came out in the 80s. I know that's when they were popular. I just can't think of when they actually came out, but it's fine.
They really didn't exist until Kanye West, let's be honest.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, for sure. 808s and Heartbreaks. That was actually the first album that ever used an 808. Yeah. It's funny, like we the modern day usage of 808 is just to mean like any kind of like bass sound and like hip hop, but or even like most pop music at this point uses 808s, but very rarely do you hear 808 drum machine sounds today. But we still use that word so much just because I guess, I don't know, it's kind of funny. I love it. So yeah, electronic drum machines, and then most of the like either vocal or like string or horn stuff is sampled rather than live. So, you know, sampled, chopped up. And I mean, I love to like use Daft Punk, one of my favorite bands, as an example, especially on Discovery. What was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Oh yeah, rest in peace. God damn it. Too soon. I wish. Sorry. It's okay. It's okay. Sampled basically versions of the sounds that were found within classic disco, and that kind of makes up house. It's the most, I would say, direct lineage from disco, and especially French house, I feel like, is one of the ones that samples like classic disco records so heavily. Either French house or just like OG Detroit house, probably. There's a lot of other subgenres that deviate a little more. Like some of them are like almost entirely like synth and like drum focused and like not really sample focused. But still, even with those genres, a lot of the building blocks from disco are there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, wait, can I say something though?
Yeah.
Real quick? I've been meaning to tell you this for so long. Okay, I used to love EDM music when I was younger. Like, cause anytime you bring it up, my dad is a huge EDM like guy. He loves it. Like even now, he's in his like 50s, and he's still every time he gets in his car, he's like bumping it. And he's always playing like when I was younger, it was way more house, and now that he's getting older, it's kind of more like techno, kind of lo-fi kind of vibes. But I just think it's so funny that like growing up, I used to love EDM music. Like I went I went to a global dance festival in 6th grade with my dad at Red Rocks. And it was so funny because it was just like rave kids, rave people, you know, and then just like a little girl and an old man sitting up in the back, just like
That's crazy. That is really funny.
So I don't know. I've always had like it holds a special place in my heart for sure, EDM. And once when you like brought up this idea to me, I always thought like I'm wondering if my growing up on like mostly just EDM, I wonder if that kind of brought out my love for disco at the same time, you know?
That's like what I'm feeling right now, because I had never, I mean, honestly, it was when you started talking about disco and like mentioning some songs, and I had listened to like plenty of disco tracks before, but like I'd never really gotten into it. But then it was really like a combination of like you just like constantly berating all of the members of Crave the Sound with disco recommendations, and then the disillusion of Daft Punk, where I just kept listening to a bunch of Daft Punk. And it's really their 2013 album, Random Access Memories, that like kind of drove the point home to me. Have you listened to that album?
I have not. I need to look more into Daft Punk. I do.
Okay. If I would highly recommend that one. I think you would love it. Whereas a lot as like their older stuff and just house music in general is like inspired by disco, I would say that Random Access Memories is like them making disco music inspired by house. Like they really go back to the roots. They work with Nile, I don't know if it's Niles or Nile Rogers. Do you know who that is?
Nile Rogers?
Yeah, from Le Chic. Is that Le Chic? Le Chic?
Yeah.
Which they have so many freaking bangers. What do they have? Do they have? I think they do, right? Yay. Yeah, so Nile Rogers is heavily featured on it. His playing is all over that record. And a bunch of like, I don't know, classic disco artists that they reached out to collaborate with. So I mean,
okay, I'll definitely
Get Lucky, I'm sure. That goes without saying. And you know how like just straight up disco that song is. So a lot of that record is like that, and it's one of my favorites. So yeah, that, and then like I said, you and my just like prehistory with this kind of music made me like want to like start to learn about it more. And then that also has been kind of fueling my like obsession. And I would still say that I'm not super educated as much as I want to be on it, but just like as to like how music is transformative and just like receptive to everything around it. It's not like disco was just popular in the 70s because it was popular in the 70s. Like, you know, like there's so many other things surrounding it and every other kind of music. And like, I just think like the story of like how we got to where we are today is really interesting. And especially with the kind of music that I really am into today, I just like want to know where it comes from. And there's I feel like you could never learn everything there is to know about it, but it's really interesting regardless.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think it's kind of interesting. This is like kind of like because music shapes a lot of like the times, I guess, because like disco was huge even with like the fashion trends that was going on in the 70s. Like everyone was kind of wearing like like the hippie kind of stuff until disco came around, and then it was more of the like really flamboyant, like really big hair, really crazy stuff. That's because that's what they were wearing at the clubs, and that's what the music reflected.
Mm-hmm.
And so trance music will even branch out into other aspects of like pop culture, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
And
for
it's
sure.
still okay.
Yeah, like pop culture, and then this is something else we've been kind of hinting at and referencing a few times, just like how much of a like social and political movement it was too, despite the fact that in terms of its lyricism, a lot of times it was really simple and like repetitive. But within that, I mean, that was already kind of like subversive and not what you would expect, not what people thought maybe was, again, like real music or whatever. Or Donna Summer being like super promiscuous and like having like a 20-minute like kind of sort of moaning song, basically. Like it's just like, I mean, the liberation and like everything that it kind of stood for as well is really cool. And another reason why it was chastised so much, of course, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And that's what I kind of feel like EDM kind of picks that up, because when you go to like raves and stuff, like the liberation, you feel sober, you know, because also a lot of people like to go a little crazy. But even if you go sober, like the liberation and the freedom you feel just like surrounded by a bunch of people just like headbanging and jumping around, like you get that sense. I feel like you get that same sense that people in the 70s got from like the disco clubs, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Like what kind of, besides like house or whatever and techno, what kind of like EDM? This is just, I'm just curious. Like, what kind of EDM did you listen to growing up?
Um, I don't know that I feel like those two were really the big ones. House. There's another one that's kind of like house, but not exactly. I can't. It's been way too long. Sorry,
That's
but
okay.
it has been. What's it called? I don't know. I have a few. I wrote down a few DJs that I remember. Because my dad was really big on like the local Denver DJ scene. So I have two big like Denver ones. I don't know if you've heard of them before, but DJ Blend. Have you heard of him?
I'm probably not going to know any of this, but I would love to hear it. I do not know him.
Yeah, he wears like this crazy clown mask. He's really cool. But so, and I think he's still making music like he was before COVID. So, um, but he's really funny. He's more house than anything. And then DJ Irene. I don't think she makes music anymore, but she was like the biggest like female DJ on like in the Denver scene. So growing up, she was a big like inspiration to me. Like I loved
Nice.
it. My dad actually went to one of her shows, and he got her to sign like they didn't have anything for her to sign, so he just grabbed like a little doily that they used for decoration, and she signed that for me. So that was cool. But
That's
it was kind of more of the local Denver stuff that I was really like surrounded with, and then of
that's
course you
really
had like
cool.
Skrillex, like Tiesto, and big names like you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so mainly just like house and techno, I guess, but
Nice.
and just local Denver DJ.
I have to ask, you didn't go to
Yeah. What are
Fairview,
your
did
favorites?
you?
Oh,
Oh, no, no, no.
no.
Okay. Sorry, it's just I got the internet connection unstable. I was not saying no, no, no to anything else. I was like, I didn't think you went to Fairview, but
You're
when you
good.
said you were from Denver, I'm like, oh no, do we have another in our midst?
No, yeah. I know like everybody from Crave is from Fairview, but I went to school up in Loveland, Fort Collins. So
Oh, okay. All right. I think you might have even mentioned that before, but it's all right. Cool, cool. Oh, what
yeah,
did you asked what I liked? I mean, the
yeah.
first thing I got into really was specifically Daft Punk. I wouldn't even say house, because like back in my childhood, the only things I really listened to were either like my dad's old iPod, which had a lot, I would say mostly like kind of classic rocky stuff. It had a few things that were kind of influential to me as a kid, like a few hip hop acts, pretty much all just like white rappers. But like at least decent stuff, like old Eminem, which was decent, and Beastie Boys, and then some Daft Punk. So Daft Punk was huge. And then like
Yeah.
in like middle school and elementary school, I mostly just listened to like video game soundtracks and classical music because I like thought pop music was shitty and I thought I was like cool for not liking it or something, which is just like I feel
Yeah.
like a common mindset that like especially kids trying to be cool or whatever would have, or like old people who are actually just, or whatever age people who are actually just lame. It's one thing if you're a kid and you think that's cool, but if you really just like feel that to your core, you're lame. But after that, I would say, do you know what future funk is?
No, I don't.
It's this, it's kind of like house kind of beats, and then it samples, rather than disco, it samples Japanese like city pop from the 80s, which is really fire and very heavily just like inspired by the popular like disco music that kind of preceded it. It's like a fusion of like disco, electronic, funk, pop, and it's a more modern genre, future funk, sampling those like 80s stuff. But even within that, there's a lot of just like the same kind of core things that make up like disco. So there too, there's a lot of that. And yeah, I didn't like electronic besides that, and like Daft Punk. I was, what that electronic music was one of the last genres I opened up to because I was like a band kid too, so like a lot of kids just like kind of looked down on like hip hop and like EDM. Like that was just kind of how it was. It's really stupid, but yeah, and I to an extent felt that way at a certain time.
Yeah, definitely. I think an interesting conversation that we should all have is kind of how like our parents' music influenced our music taste today.
Definitely.
Because I feel like that's such a wide, like a common, yeah.
Yeah, we need to do that
Because
for
like
sure.
again, like my dad, like yeah, because like my dad only raising me on, because I don't really listen to EDM that much anymore. Like I have a playlist from like sixth grade that sometimes I'll like jam out to if I'm feeling nostalgic. But um even now, like some of the music I listen to is definitely influenced by that. And like my mom grew me up on like just like classic hip hop, and now I'm like really into rap. And so, I feel like that's such a thing that everyone really experiences.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll have to pitch that at the next meeting, I guess.
yeah, do it. Another thing that I just feel like kind of ties into this conversation a little bit, uh, with like how music changes and whatnot, is, I don't know about you, but like one of my biggest fears, like in the entire world, is to like be at a point where I like hate most of the like, I don't know, music coming out or popular music or whatever. Like I feel like once I get to, if I ever get to that point, I don't want to be alive anymore because I hate so much. I hate people that are just like closed-minded about like kinds of music that aren't what they grew up on. And I know there's like that very scientific like fact that you're probably going to always be like throughout most of your life predisposed to like what you liked in like high school and college, which is fine. I'm sure there will be a time when Tyler the Creator is not popping at all, and like bringing him up is just like bringing up, I don't know, Led Zeppelin or AC/DC, not to like shade them, but like, generally not every like person loves them. They're not as widely popular, I guess. Although I don't know, they're still pretty popular. I don't, maybe not the best example, but yeah. But if I'm ever like, oh, music was better in my day when Tyler the Creator and Daft Punk or whatever, I don't know, just like a few examples, were making music. Like if I ever get to that point, put me down, put me in the nursing home.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I was yeah, put me out, pull the plug. But I was just having a conversation with one of my friends about how um like even like pop music in the early 2010s was so great, and like pop music now is like okay. And I was like thinking about that. I was like, am I already like old? Like, am I already like stuck in that mindset? And I was like, I just need to be more open-minded, you know, and more just like, I need to listen to it more. But I got kind of scared because I was like, no, I was like, I don't want to think like that.
Yeah, it's that could be another good conversation too for like a whole podcast, honestly. It's just like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I mean, we talked about, you know, the history. We talked. Oh, let's just do this because I want to make a playlist for this episode as well. What are some of your favorite disco songs? And that can be like straight up disco or like songs that kind of come a little bit after.
Okay, I have a whole disco playlist actually. So let's go through this.
Sick.
Okay, Night Fever by the Bee Gees. Banger, absolute banger. Love that song. Okay, She's a Bad Mama Jamma by Carl Carlton. That's kind of like the original disco, like very beginning. So swag.
True. Banger.
Ain't Nobody by Shaka Khan. Beautiful song. Got to Be Real by Cheryl Lynn. I saw you put that in the playlist, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, you got the classics like It's Raining Men. Love that song. And then like Blame It on the Boogie, Jackson 5. A little bit before, but still great.
Yeah.
Rock With You, Michael Jackson. And then even, kind of bringing up the whole, like, when Michael Jackson did a little bit of, like, rock and, like, disco. I feel like, Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry.
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of same
for sure.
vibe to it, I guess.
For sure.
Because I was putting together a disco playlist, and that song came up, and I was like, this song's not disco. And then I listened to it, and I was like, oh, wait, it actually kind of is. The Hustle by Van Mccoy. Yeah. That's a great one. There's also a dance behind it. You have to learn the dance. It goes kind of hard.
Oh, is that? I was just like watching some like video. I was watching a lot of videos to try and like kind of like learn. Is that like the couple dance or is that like a one person dance? Because I was like watching.
It's kind of like the
Sorry, what?
It's like the cha-cha slide.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like the cha-cha slide. Yeah.
Is this like a newer thing? The dance? Do you know?
Vibe. It's just like you walk forward.
Oh.
No, they were doing it back in the club, like in the 70s.
In this documentary that I was watching, they were talking about how I think it was, maybe it wasn't the hustle, but I thought it was, how it like kind of bridged a bit of a gap because a lot of people saw disco as like kind of scummy and like trashy. But then conservatives liked the hustle because there was a dance associated with it. And I thought it was like the reason that apparently like conservative people were kind of into it was because it was like a couple's dance. And I guess that for whatever reason, they were like, oh, this is like a little, people aren't just like doing their own thing. People are dancing like how we used to. But maybe there were, I'm sure there were, maybe that was part of the couple's dance. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe I got it wrong, but it's just kind of like, yeah.
No, now that you say that, I know the dance you're talking about. So
yeah,
and it definitely is associated with that song. So maybe there's a few. I don't know, or maybe it's part of the same dance.
Maybe there's a few variations. Or yeah. And then definitely Super Freak, Rick James. Rick James is another great artist. Love Rick James.
I love Rick James
so much.
I think I might have had that on the playlist. Do you have any like kind of more it doesn't even have to be modern, but like post-disco, heavily disco inspired songs that you'd want to throw in there as well?
I don't think so. I don't know. I'll think about it, but I don't think so.
I have a lot, so I can pretty much just exclusively add those, and I don't think we're really missing any. I think we have a good mix of classic disco. I might throw in a few of the ones we specifically referenced. I'll throw in Good Times and I Feel Love. But yeah. Other than that, I'll add some of the Daft Punk and newer stuff as well.
Yes, I mean.
Cool. Any closing thoughts? I don't know what they would be.
All I gotta say is keep disco alive. Listen to disco once a week. Have a dance party with your friends when everyone's vaccinated. Very fun. Yeah, just keep disco alive. That's my takeaway.
Agreed. I second that strongly. Keep disco alive. Keep listening to house. Keep incorporating disco elements into pop music because it's just objectively the best, most dancey formula for music. I don't know what else to tell you. If you think otherwise, you probably aren't a very good dancer. And I say that as someone who can't dance, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And we will have a playlist you can check out with some of our favorite disco classics, as well as house and just more contemporary music inspired by disco that you can check out if you have any interest in that, and you should. So do that.
All bangers. Just a playlist of bangers. Check it out.
All right. Thank you for listening to Crave the Podcast. Next week, for real this time, we will be doing a game show on Wednesday. This has been much talked about and delayed, but Wednesday, April 14th, probably between 6:30 and 7:30. I would say probably 7 or 7:15 is when we'll actually do it, but somewhere in that time range. If you want to check out a fun, different kind of thing, we'll be doing that live on our YouTube channel. So check it out.
Woo!
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.